Yeah. Um, and so welcome. We're excited to have you here. This event, just as a preview, is set up for um, audiences that have registered, but it is not for press. So there's no press here on no press allowed. We will have a recording of this webinar and send out the recording and the slides that Deb is going to present for us, and I'm going to present for us. We would absolutely love to receive your questions as we go through, and going to ask you if you could please reserve them. We'll wrap our presentation slides at around 12:45, 12:40, 12:45. So if you can keep your questions ready and send them over. If you want to send them over early, that's great. That'll give us time to review them and prepare for the answers. So if you can just put those in the chat as we go, that's great. Just by way of introduction, I'm Sam Tetlow. If you don't know me, I'm the founder and CEO of Grant Engine. I'm really pleased to bring today's installment to you as really us working as a company for you, our clients, and bringing information that we believe is essential to have as you navigate the current environment in the government funding domain, and really get an advantage, right? An inside track, which is what today is all about. Joining me on the call on the Grant Engine side is some of our top flight members of our team. So really excited to have them here. I'll give some shout outs as we go along. And joining me on the webinar as a speaker is Deb Autor. She has been in a unique and very elevated position in the FDA, serving 12 years, concluding as the Deputy Commissioner of the FDA, and also chairs the FDA Alumni Association, which has been more active more recently for all reasons that you're aware of. Deb is the CEO of Healthcare Innovation Catalysts, a very highly regarded and deeply connected regulatory consulting firm to help navigate the FDA for you. So really, please join me in welcoming Deb, and really excited to have her here with us on our webinar series. So I'm gonna ask Deb to kick off and go first to walk through her slides, and then I'll join after that.
Great. Thanks, Sam. I appreciate that really kind introduction, and delighted to see so many of you here today. Sam and I have spent some time getting to know each other and collaborating, and realized that we have a lot of potential folks in common who might be interested in hearing what Grant Engine has to say, and also hearing the latest on developments at the FDA. So I'm here today to share that with you. And to start, let me just put my screen up, and hopefully everybody can see that. So I want to tell you a little bit about Healthcare Innovation Catalyst as I get started, also known as HIC. We are, as Sam mentioned, a deep and broad regulatory consulting firm, and we do work for drug, biotech, and device companies as well, almost anyone FDA regulated. And we work on the pre-market side, the post-market side, and also help with market access and reimbursement. So that can be as soon as somebody who has a new product and needs to kind of understand the pathway through FDA. What does that look like? What are my processes? What are my milestones? What kind of data do I need? Writing protocols, writing INDs, IDEs, NDAs, BLAs, ANDAs, 510Ks, PMAs, de novos, what have you. We have a specialty in biostatistical analysis, also in real world evidence. And on the post-market side, it can be inspection readiness, the good manufacturing practice or good clinical practice side, inspection management, training, remediation if need be. And the market access and reimbursement are really, we believe, additional pieces that can be really important to innovators to understand what is it going to look like when they get to marketplace. Are they going to be able to get their product paid for? So we think that's important. And beyond that, because we have a lot of connections with Department of Defense and Veterans Administration, can also help with access issues there. And our clients really range from tiny to huge, honestly, startups to well-established multinationals. And as I said, pharmaceutical, biotech, medical device, diagnostics, combo products, digital health, and e-clinical. We have about 80 consultants, about half of whom are ex-FDA, a combined over 650 years of FDA experience. So, but let me tell you a little bit about what is going on at FDA. And as Sam mentioned, among other things, I'm chair of the Alumni Association, which, for better or worse, has actually grown quite a bit recently. We're hoping to play and continuing to play, I think, a really nice role in supporting people who are leaving the agency and helping them to understand future career opportunities, and also just be there providing moral support and networking and connections and a lot more things, which are another conversation. But there have been a lot of changes at the agency lately. I'm sure everybody's been following the news, but initially there was actually probationary employees that were let go. Then the fork in the road offer for people who want to just leave the agency. So that was another opportunity for people to go and receive multiple months of severance. Then there have been opportunities for voluntary retirement. And then on April 1st, there were wide scale reduction in force actions at the agency. And in total, it comes out to about 3,500 employees out of about 19,000, so about 19% of staff. A lot of the losses are across policy, communications, IT, HR, program management, and review and inspection coordination. So essentially, most people with those kinds of titles uh, were let go. Um, and also, as I'm sure people know, a lot of the high level officials have left. So Patrizia Capizoni, who was the head of CEDAR, the Center for Drugs, left towards the beginning of the Trump administration. She's now chief medical officer at Pfizer. Peter Marks, I'm sure you all saw, who was the head of the Center for Biologics, left recently. The high level officials, the center director at CDRH is still the same person who was there, but the deputy center director for, I believe, science is now gone. And so there are a lot of other people kind of at different levels of the organization, as you can imagine, with offers for voluntary retirement that affected fairly senior people, the agency, a lot of who have decided at that point to leave. So there are a lot of people who have left, and a significant impact for sure. Some RIFT employees are now being rehired. I've talked to multiple people who just received offers to return. Some of them will, some of them will not. But I think now that basically all of this happened before Marty McCary officially came on board as new FDA commissioner, I think now he is working with the center directors and leadership of the agency to try to figure out how to kind of put the pieces into place, and who needs to be brought back. But it's definitely a significant impact. With respect to review issues, which I thought would be of particular interest to folks, the cuts didn't target reviewers directly, so the reviewers are generally there unless they took early retirement. But it's much, much harder when they don't have support and they don't have people in leadership, for example, to break conflicts. For a while, the library was shut down. That was problematic for people doing reviews. Now I think the library's back up, but maybe not the librarians. So it's definitely a significant change. And there was a report in the news last week from Scott Gottlieb saying that as many as 600 drug reviewers have recused themselves from the review process because they're interviewing with pharma companies. And as you might imagine, if anybody starts to interview for a job with potentially regulated industry, they need to go to the supervisor and say, I have a conflict. I can't work on these matters. So there could be up to 5,000 people leaving the agency. And I know the commissioners talked about bringing it down to levels that were earlier, earlier personnel levels of the agency. And in fact, the agency has grown a lot. It's also, however, added new things like regulation of tobacco and the Center for Tobacco Products. So overall, I think there will be a slimmed down agency at the end of this. And Janet Woodcock, who many may know, my former boss, I think had an interesting analogy for this. And she basically said, It's as if they've kept the doctors at the hospital, but let go of all the nurses and phlebotomists, and that's going to make it very difficult to conduct surgery. Now I'm going to try to get a little more hopeful about this, but I thought that was an interesting and telling analogy. And a reviewer, device reviewer who spoke to the press had said that this is slowing innovation and will result in less access to life-saving devices and treatments, or may do so, and this will have an impact on industry bottom line. There's also some question about the impact on user fee programs. User fee funding has to be balanced out with budget authority, congressionally provided funding, and there are triggers to user fee programs. Where if there's not enough budget authority funding, then the user fee funds can stop or be clawed back. I think there have been now statements from HHS or from the agency saying we're not going to let that happen. But there were a lot of concerns expressed about that. Also, with respect to future user fees, most of the people who negotiated those user fees are no longer there. I don't know if they will get offers to come back. They might, but that could be problematic because the user fee programs are up for renegotiation. And without those folks, that's a very complicated process where the agency sits down with industry and figures out what the goals letters are going to be. So there is some concern there. There was concern about whether the review timelines would be met, and what that's going to look like. The commissioner came out in the last couple of days and said, I assure you, and I think HHS has said the same thing, PDUFA targets will be met. Now, PDUFA targets are a certain percentage of things done at a certain time. FDA has managed generally to beat those targets pretty well, but I think meeting those targets will be good and hopefully will happen. There's some question about whether the user fee program should just be renewed as is. That's been a suggestion that folks have made, given the fact that so much has changed, so much is kind of in flux right now. It might be hard to go through what's been the traditional negotiation process for PDUFA. And again, I talked about some of this, but with respect specifically to drug reviews, there are some reports of delays in review decisions, missed deadline. There's a report in the press in particular about a missed PDUFA deadline, which may or may not be attributable to some of these changes. I do think what we're seeing at HIC is definitely some situations where the feedback seems a little bit uh, less in depth than we might have seen in the past. Some delays. I'm hesitant to attribute all delays to potential changes in personnel because delays do happen. PDUFA goals do get missed. There's a certain level that are permissible to miss. But at the same time, there have been complaints about the limitation in literature access. As I said, the library's back up, but it's not clear whether they really have the full support there. I think the absence of policy folks will be a challenge, although some of those folks I'm sure will be brought back. And then coordination between divisions, just kind of the kind of interstitial tissue is missing a little bit. And so I think that can be challenging. Now, that said, one more thing to be aware of is there was actually a massive proposal for reorganization at the agency that was leaked out of HHS. It has now, the commissioner came out in the last day or two and said, we're not doing that. We're going to make it work within our current structure. So I think that's positive, but I just wanted to include it just so people understood the magnitude of that, because ultimately it's not inconceivable that HHS could come back and say, no, we want to reorganize. But it also shows, I think, the scope of what the current administration is considering vis-a-vis FDA or is willing to consider. And in that reorg, there would have been an Office of Product Evaluation and Regulation, which would have been the hub for product review and regulatory decision-making across drugs, biologics, devices, tobacco, and foods. Drugs, by the way, includes animal drugs. So as you can imagine, that's a radical departure from the agency's current structure, which is split into different centers for each of those kinds of products, each of which does review for those products, because those reviews are very, very different processes with different legal schemes and different standards. But again, I think this is not happening. At least that's what has been said. There was also a goal to bring back all of the inspections and centralize that, which is actually something the agency has just moved away from last year. And then there would be central components for policy, administration, strategic programs, and digital health. So again, a reorg that probably won't happen, but worth understanding and knowing it was put on the table anyway, and potentially could resurface, although I find it unlikely. I think Sam's going to talk about it more, but proposal for a 30% cut to the HHS discretionary budget um, is out there for FY26, including a decrease in FDA's budget authority, which is separate from the user fee funding, from 3.6 to 2.9 billion, which is a significant cut. Still a lot of money, but a significant cut. So, okay. So what does the future look like? Well, I think the new commissioner's only been in place for a few short weeks. And so I think there's a lot to be seen about what he's going to do and say, and um, how that's going to work vis-a-vis HHS, because FDA reports into, as people probably know, the Department of Health and Human Services, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the commissioner's boss. And I can tell you, I've been through many at FDA, and when I was at the Department of Justice before that, I've been through many administrations, and each one has its own priorities and its own means of controlling or not controlling the commissioner of the FDA and the workings of the FDA. So I think there's a lot to be seen as to how things will play out. I think we have seen RFK Jr. being very interested in a lot of specific issues relating to FDA and FDA decision making. And so it's still early days. Couple, I think, really hopeful notes. FDA put out an announcement on a roadmap to eliminate traditional animal testing requirements for some drugs. That was on April 10th. My guess is that was brewing in the agency, but now they've put it out, which is positive. And so they've talked about introducing alternatives to traditional animal testing, such as AI models, organoids, and organ-on-chip systems, and launch of pilot programs to assess feasibility of new approach methodologies. So I think that's promising for sponsors. I think it's can alleviate some of the burdens and alleviate, obviously, none of us want to do any more testing on animals than we need to, and hopefully bring some streamlining to some early testing of products. Commissioner McCary, on a Fox News interview with Megyn Kelly, advocated for a new conditional approval pathway, and talked about that as allowing approval based on, quote, plausible mechanisms of action, and said that would be especially appropriate for rare diseases where randomized clinical trials are impracticable, as we all know. That's a problem with a very small population, and that there would be more reliance on post-market surveillance to ensure safety and efficacy. There hasn't been any elaboration behind that I've seen, other than kind of talking about it in broad strokes, but that could be a step forward in terms of streamlining development of some rare disease treatments and possibly other treatments as well. In that interview and others, Commissioner McCary has focused on autism. Clearly, that's a focus for him and for the HHS secretary, and President Trump has spoken about it as well. A lot about the food supply and food additives and petroleum-based additives being a concern, chronic disease. He has talked about more use of real-world evidence and kind of harnessing what's in electronic health records, which I think is a positive thing, and something that, in particular, I and my firm are big proponents of, and have done a lot of work to find innovative ways to use RWE to support drug and device development. Talked about the gut microbiome as being very, very important in health, and a new kind of frontier um, in science. So I think that's important. He's mentioned an improved pathway for medical AI, which would be good, and said everything will be grounded in gold standard science and common sense. So again, it's reading tea leaves, listening to interviews, but that seems to be some indication of what the priorities and kind of guidance will be going forward. Finally, practical advice for sponsors. First of all, it's not all doom and gloom, I don't believe, personally. So I would say don't assume your drugs and devices won't get, or products won't get through FDA. I don't think that's correct. Don't feel like you have to run off and start running all your trials elsewhere. That's not my personal opinion. I think that would be um, overreacting based on what we've seen so far. I think you can think that some reviews will take longer. Some guidances will take longer. That there will be some more difficulty in just kind of getting some of the support from the agency you might have seen in the past. I think that puts a premium on programs like Breakthrough, Fast Track, and Interact, which are all pathways that allow more engagement with the agency in development of certain products. I think you should be strategic and precise. So I would try to not go to the agency for everything. When they're meeting questions in pre-IND meetings, for example, I would optimize those questions, think very, very carefully about what you need to ask, have very well structured developed briefing packages so that you can get maximum value in your time with the agency, ask the best questions possible, and support them. Really ask when you ask a question. I would hope for that kind of meeting, you know what the answer should be, what you think it ought to be, and come well prepared in your briefing package for substantiating what you think is the right path forward. Keep an eye on the horizon, legislative and budget risks, obviously. You want to know if anything's coming. Lean on experts, and this is an ad for us, and really for there are lots of experts out there, but there are a lot of us who really do spend a lot of time paying very, very close attention to how things are changing at the agency, and have the privilege of kind of seeing that through the eyes of a lot of different sponsors, a lot of different companies, and really understanding the nuances. And this is a good time to really make sure that whatever shots you take at the agency are well aimed, I guess, for lack of a better analogy. So, um, and I would say also there are opportunities. With change comes opportunity, and that is the case here as well. Um, this is a good time to think about new ideas and new ways of doing things, and also to think about opportunities for deregulation. The Office of Management and Budget issued a request for information on April 9th, soliciting ideas for deregulation. And specifically on rules that should be rescinded and reasons for their rescission. So that may be something to think about. And I would say don't assume the rules of the game are the same. I think I have seen multiple situations where conversations happen differently. Ideas which would have been taken off the table precipitously in the past may not be off the table. And so I think it's also worth considering whether, I guess what I would say, there are a lot of things that were kind of norms that we all were adjusted to and used to, and I think some of the norms have changed, and I think um, you can use your own judgment as to whether that's positive or negative, but I think sometimes it's probably both. And so there are opportunities for to think about things differently. And so I would say that to try to end on a hopeful note. And just to say thank you for listening. Happy to talk to any of you anytime.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Really, really useful. And you've got your ear close to the ground, so that's really great. We've got in the Google Doc, we've got 2 questions for you as you go, so we can you can prep those, and we'll handle those when the Q&A hits. If you can see my title slide now, can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so let's dive in on my portion. We're going to definitely look to leave time for questions. So I just want to touch on the webinar series. There's some content that's useful for your future. We'll do a quick update of how funds are flowing and some positive news that is happened and still to come. Get into what the first 100 days, which happened yesterday, the 29th of April, of the current administration, and what we're hearing from individuals at the program officer, program manager level, and also higher up in certain agencies. And that landscape, what does that look like for the near term? How to play to win in this environment. And then we'll touch on what's upcoming in the future. A quick overview of who we are and who's communicating to you. We've got a team of 77 people and growing that is really here to save. Our mission and our activities that we do with you for your products is really here to save lives. That top line on this slide is really our bottom line. And we're here to do that and to extend the length of a quality life. And of course, we do that by bringing funding in conjunction with you to an agency, getting broader and broader, whether that's a nonprofit, to get you funding, to bring your product to market, to improve the standard of care for patients that your product is going to have an impact on. That is our raison d'etre. That's really the fundamental reason why Grant Engine exists. And we're really here to do that with you, and to bring products that are differentiated, that really improve that standard of care. There's a lot of pieces that we have in our process and certainly the depth of our team, but that really all culminates in a win rate that's 2 to 4x higher than the national average. So that there's a lot of things that make that happen, but that's the end output of how we get to save lives together with you. This is a quick recap of previous webinars that we did a series with MTech. I wanted to push this up really as a reference, where when you get the slides and the recording in your email afterwards, this middle webinar in particular, if you're going to be in business in a year or 2 years or 10 years, that webinar in particular has a number of fundamental strategies that we have seen work. We have case studies of customer funding models that have exploited these strategies for their benefit. If you click on that link, you can get to the recording on the 26th of February. And at minute 37, that'll get you to the juicy part around those strategies and how they come to play. We have a very small group that we're going to host with really PPD and Thermo Fisher hosting. Deb is actually the moderator of this event next Thursday evening in Rockville. I think we're at capacity or maybe one slot left. And then we will be at Bio in mid-June in Boston. So please reach out to us if you'd like to meet. We'd be delighted to do that at that event or prior or after. Okay, so let's get into the funds flow. This chart, if you've been on these previous webinars, has a similar format, but updated to account for current time period. And this looks at new SBIR, STTR awards by year. So the first 4 months of the calendar year, 2022, then it rose to 2023, came down under the Biden administration in the first 4 months of 2024. And here's the latest data available as of late yesterday is through the 22nd of April. And here's how 2024 stacked up compared to 2025. So getting closer. And as folks are aware, I'm sure, there was a continuing resolution passed on the 14th of March, really at the same levels, some pluses and minuses, which we'll touch on in a moment later in the slide, but substantially the same budget as in 2024. That goes through September 30th, so that's good news. And then study sections and council meetings were delayed. They are now happening to a greater frequency, and some are still getting delayed. So I think generally things are moving, but there's been a body blow to these agencies. And so they're working through executing on their mandate to have study sections, do council meetings. And what we're seeing is a reconsolidation of running panel review and study sections on a centralized basis versus what happened in January, where it was decentralized at the institute level. Here's a quick snapshot of what's happened in essentially the last month, at least from what the data is available. So these bars are where the funding was through March 21st of 2024, and then this year, 25. And you can see it was half, right, a month ago. And there's been a big catch up. We're at about 75% of last year. And so things have started to move at a faster velocity this year compared to last year as a form of catching up. So that's a dynamic. And one of the really interesting things is, I think, as certain members of the current administration have said is, the turmoil, the turbulence, the unsettling dynamic, borderline fear or outright fear of this administration is really couched as a feature, not a bug, to unsettle other countries, to drive them to the negotiating table for tariffs. That has worked effectively for the marketplace and the SBIR, for companies going after funding. We saw just listening to the market, seeing number of submissions. This is anecdotal data, but fewer submissions in April. And this is one of the greatest ironies of this environment that we're in, because the funding is fully expected to catch up by the end of the fiscal year. The budgets are there. Those still need to be released, and NIH is playing it close to the vest, as they normally do, waiting until that late in the fiscal year through September 30th to release funds. But those companies, those leaders inside our client base and prospective client base that had the fortitude to stay the course and submit for the April cycle are going to enjoy a much better equation on supply and demand. It's going to be less competitive, we believe, for the submission cycle that just happened. And that, to me, is one of the greatest ironies. We communicated that out to our clients. The ones that were closest to, I think, got that message, and they stayed the course. And they're going to enjoy a better chances, all else equal. We are great at what we do, but a market dynamic is certainly helpful. And that's a real vote for staying the course. This is a turbulent environment on purpose. And that commitment that you have to your business, to your team, to your patients with your products, and that fortitude to stay the course is crucial to participating in this environment. The money is there. It's going to be more competitive in the future. We absolutely believe that, compared to 2024. And we're here to help you get that money. That funding, and we're going to give you tools to do it yourself, right? We're here to save lives ultimately, but we're here as your partner to work together. That funding opportunity does come with new rules, and I'm not going to go through each line item in this slide, but it's really here for referential point. But one very clear trend that we are seeing is a much more significant scrutiny on foreign risk. Any ownership to any of the countries of interest, North Korea, China, Turkmenistan, Russia, and I think one or two others, is a reason to quickly say no at JIT stage. We are seeing this expand into key personnel on certain areas. So that's an area that you need to pay attention to and really continue to monitor. On the 21st, the NIH issued a notice about reinforcing the act of promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. And a new news there is that they're stating they can recover all funds if you're seen as promoting DEI vis-a-vis their grants. I'll read the notice for full language, which is crucial to read, but that's a new addition. So more on that, about how to play that as we go. But those are real dynamics. This is really a reference slide that you can look to. And where are we, right, at the first 100 days? We've seen a lot of noise, I'll say, communication on the DOGE efforts to reduce spending. We've seen whole agencies be really all but fully mothballed. Where are we on spending? This is a data point from a reputable source that looks at, in the red, cumulative spending for the first 100 days for the 2025 compared to the last 2 years, 24 and 23. And you can see that the red line is higher than the blue-green lines by $200 billion. That's about an 11% increase. And that to me is kind of actually surprising, given all the efforts that have been put forth by this administration. And it really hasn't happened yet. So that's And yet there's been pluses and minuses. We've seen increases on Department of Homeland Security, Border Patrol, and USAID, went from 10,000 people down to now ostensibly 294. That's a $60 billion agency previously. CDMRP got a significant cut of about 57%, and others did too. So I think this does speak to money flowing and things being in certain pockets. The government has turned on a USDA vaccine solicitation for a new $100 million opportunity that is to address avian bird flu. Meanwhile, vaccines get cut in other areas. So there is money out there, and this administration is going to continue to try and cut spending, is what I see as a headline that has not yet turned into reality. So let's turn to one of the slides previously had the Health and Human Services organizational structure be fully reset in most of the areas. So this is the structure prior, call it then, early this year before inauguration. We had the NIH had 27 institute centers. ARPA-H was nested inside the NIH. BARDA was under ASPR, but substantially its own agency. And as Deb highlighted, some significant changes in green. The FDA has had a lot of reductions in staff, a lot of changes at leadership. There is the creation of Office of Healthy Futures that includes ARPA-H and BARDA, still operating as individual sub-agencies, but under that new office. I'll have a slide next on the NIH and where that appears to be going, but is not yet final. And a new Administration for a Healthy America, AHA, which includes OASH, SAMHSA, ATSDR, NIOSH, and a few others. The Health and Human Services organization in total is about 28% of the United States government spend. A lot of that is in CMS, but that's not a small percentage. You think about defense, and then lots of other pieces as being rounding out that picture. So I do expect, and I think it's reasonable to assume, some ongoing budget reduction pressures in key agencies that we see. And I think NIH, there is still those subcurrents where budgets are still looking to be compressed for fiscal year 26, which starts October 1st. This slide speaks to a leaked budget memo from the OMB. This is publicly available. When you get the slides, you can click on this. You got to search for it, which we did, but it's available. And that looks to have as Deb mentioned earlier as well, a significant proposed cut from OMB, which is really driven by the executive branch, to the NIH. And this is a pre-circulation, pre-decisional document that was leaked. And so it's not gone through committee review or anything else. But it's not a small reduction. Today, NIH is at 47 billion. What's called for in this document is 26.7. So that's about a 40% drop. We don't know that that's going to happen, but I think you need to be ready for it to happen. We'll talk about where you can, how you can play that game. But I think fundamentally, if you plan for pay lines, which is the cutoff point for whether or not an NIH grant will get funded or not, plus some other considerations, that's going to get tighter. We expect that to get tighter, and we're going to help articulate how to play that. The consolidation of 27 institutes to 8 is not final. This is a potential structure of what new names could be. And this is not final by any means, but just a preview of what could be happening. I'm a believer in being prepared for change so that when change happens, you can be more nimble and effective. So I didn't want to, we're not here to scare anyone or say the sky is falling, but really to prepare ourselves to be more effective in the near term and the long term. So that could happen, and it's just a preview of what's there. In our conversations with ARPA-H in particular, we are seeing that DOGE is playing a big role there and in other agencies as well. They are reviewing, DOGE is reviewing all program spend as it comes through. Program manager has to get their internal program approved, and is going to go through that process in a very rigorous scrubbing way. There's still money there, absolutely. Jason Ruse is the new acting director of ARPA-H. We met with him in person at Bio last year. Smart, capable, playing it conservatively, which you would hope and want someone in that role to do for the benefit of the program managers there. The things that we are seeing and hearing from program managers on the inside is that you really need to be thinking, as per the ARPA-H mission, big leaps in transformational technology and product impact. And that needs to be articulated, needs to be a big vision, and that needs to happen via small steps. The measurement is in weeks of performance and milestones, not quarters and years. And that's a hard thing to do when you're doing something transformational. Budgets are more on the order of, these are not definitive numbers, but in millions of dollars, more like 10 million and 2 years versus 25 to 40, what we saw previously. Interestingly, there are 17 program managers that are working on their missions, their visions for their technical areas that are not yet announced. They don't have a proposers day, they don't have a solicitation out yet. And that just speaks to a lot of opportunity that's expected to come in the future. Yes, competitive, and yes, big dollars. It's not everywhere that you can find a $10 million for your transformational program. We are tracking each of those at the program manager level and then identifying individual companies. So if you see companies that are there, if you see program managers that are there that don't have a program announcement, please be in touch with us. Another thing that we're hearing in the agencies, and we'll take the Department of Defense as a case study. If you can imagine complex and how DOGE and the industry are thinking about changes and how you act in this new administration. If you can imagine the Department of Defense and imagine complex and then multiply by 100, you are starting to get close. There are over 1,700 different business systems inside the Department of Defense. They spend $14 billion just on business systems to monitor what's going on. And the solution to how you go there is something we've talked about in previous webinars, is really to embed yourself. This is a theme that you'll hear consistently from us, is you really need to drive relationships and enable your own success by getting close to the user. In this case, for the Department of Defense, be close to a warfighter, and engage with that group around how do you find internal champions within those agencies that can drive change from within. We know, and you know from listening to our webinars and from your own experience, that having an internal champion in the Department of Defense is necessary. That's not the only thing you need, but it is definitely necessary. And those relationships are a key aspect of how you can be successful. The thought around DOGE is to monitor individual programs over time, not just do a dive. Should something be cut or not, and then get out? But for those larger programs, monitor them over time and ensure tangible improvements. There are changes that have happened in the payment management system when you submit invoices that implicate what you are asking for funding. Those kinds of things are going to be continued to be unpacked. So that, just expect that to happen. This is really the last meaty slide that I've got, and we'll open it up for the questions. The implications of this, we believe, are very clear and straightforward. The first is that the supply chain that you want to have for your products, this is more true around building DoD products, but it wants to be off the shelf as opposed to you got to make it custom. You need to have multiple sources. We have seen one of our clients was using Amplify Bio. They had gotten a $200 million funding from Battelle and others. And on April 4th, they were all systems go. April 7th, they shut down. Right? That had that client's materials, tissue from necropsy, and they were all systems go one day, and literally the next day shut it down. No advance notice, and it took a Herculean effort to go get those samples and get them shipped to another place. So you need to have redundancy. This is true on supply side, services supply, but now also talent. I think we're seeing this diving in of key personnel on NIH grants that are not based in the United States. Even if they don't have money, of course, you're not allowed to spend money outside the US. They have funds that are spent only in the United States, and they have key personnel outside the US. That is getting reviewed and scrubbed. So this is difficult to get my head around from an ethics or just what this country has been all about in its 250 years. But this is the game that is being played by the current administration. And if you want funding, this is some of the constraints. I think immigration, diversity have been the hallmarks of this country's success over the decades. And yet here we are. And so I think this is an opportunity for homegrown talent to step up and be world-class, as it has been in the past. The other things that you have to do are engage in expanding the volume and the diversification of your sources of funding. Go after more, go after divergent sources. Federal funding is certainly a big one. So are nonprofits, so are state funds, and so are funding sources outside the United States, global. So you need to go after more funding. Again, that webinar on the 26th is a very useful way to do that yourself. One of our program managers, who's also in charge of our solicitation and grant strategy work, Dr. June Wang, walked through how to do that yourself. And so that's a great tool for you to deploy. We think that's necessary to be successful. More shots on goal increases your chances of success. Continuing to go after equity, we are exploring supporting clients in this through some proprietary databases that we subscribe to. That link, when you get the slides, you can click on it, fill out a survey, and we're considering supporting clients as they go after equity, not in a broker-dealer, but in a relationship basis. You also need to submit more quality grants. It's more competitive, and quality will continue to win. I don't want to minimize how hard that is, but that's how success can happen. And be persistent. First-time grants are more rare to get awarded historically, and that's certainly the case now. You need to diversify and broaden relationships. And we are here, and there are new rules in the payment management system about providing deeper level of documentation when you submit invoices, being careful about existing grants that have a DEI linkage. This is, again, very painful for me to verbalize, but we have seen grants be cut off because of this linkage. We've seen contracts be stopped because of this linkage. So you need to be mindful that dynamic is out there. And we're here to help enable your success. But here at Grant Engine, we have a model of find solicitations that align with your product roadmap winning those solicitations through a range of services that match budgets, and then managing it post-award through accounting and compliance. So those are areas. We have relationships inside key agencies, and we have specific relationships with lobbying firms that can help facilitate success. That is not a panacea that we're the only ones that you should look to. You need to look to yourself as well to drive those relationships. But together, we're much more effective and poised for success. Last slide here are just what's up ahead. We have the budget negotiations are going to happen late summer, early autumn. And that's in 154 days, there will either be a government shutdown or a new budget. One other comment here on that in a minute. And then we've got midterm elections. 554 days is not a small amount of time. And so a lot can happen in the next year and a half. And then, of course, we got the presidential election going on in 28. I lied. This is actually the last slide. We believe that the SBI RSTTR program drives economic growth. And this is a call to action to advocate for protection of funding to companies and institutions that bring products to market. Contacting your congressmen and women are the way to go here. That link on democracy.io will let you get there and make it easy for you to do. And if you want a starting place for a message, we have that too. So that's a call to action. I think as we think about the new budget coming up, advocating for higher budgets and retaining the budget we have is going to be necessary. That's how democracy works effectively. It's from the bottoms up. So with that, let's turn it to questions. And Deb, I think you had the first question. So if you want to go ahead, and May, why don't you start? We've got really two key polls we wanted to ask. So why don't you do the first poll as we go, which is, given the new administration, I'm confident in my path to navigating the FDA. Deb, do you want to go ahead and answer that first question?
Yes, Sam. Thanks. That was a fabulous presentation. So much good information. The first question is whether there's going to be a new flu vaccine approved this year. And that's a fascinating question. I'm assuming that that's referring to the recent developments with the Novavax COVID booster, where the usual process for a booster shot, which is sort of minimal data and a post-market study, has been rejected by the powers that be. So the Novavax vaccine is held up. And I think that they want a study on the new formulation and the product. Now, I will say that in the course of talking about that, there was a recent interview with Marty McCary in the Inside Medicine Substack. And one of the things he said is, when talking about the Novavax situation, is these are new vaccine products, not the tried and true flu shot that's been around for 80 years. If we had a study showing that COVID boosters help keep people out of hospitals today, it could significantly increase the low COVID vaccine uptake rate that we have today. And I think I also read somewhere that the COVID vaccines had been tested, in this case, had been tested on people who didn't have prior immunity. Anyway, without getting into the details of that, which you could look up if you want, the short answer is, will there be a new flu vaccine this year? My guess is probably reading those tea leaves, but certainly there's been some question about whether the traditional way of approving boosters is appropriate in the Novavax situation, but a carve out for the tried and true flu shots we've been doing for 80 years. So short answer, probably.
Yeah, really helpful. We've got a track on the questions. I think one other question that came through is, Deb, do you see an opportunity for literature review to replace IDE studies for safety and efficacy with post-market surveillance, providing data on safety and efficacy?
Yeah, I mean, there absolutely are times when literature reviews can replace traditional clinical trials for support of devices. It's going to depend on the robustness of the data, the device, the situation, but we actually have a lot of a lot of experience with those. And the literature reviews obviously need to be pretty robust too, but it's certainly possible in specific circumstances. Happy to talk to anybody about it at any time.
Yeah, great. I'll answer one and then I'll turn it back over to you if you're tracking Deb on the Google Doc for question 5 after I answer this one. So you can see the poll results. We'll just touch on these where 70% are either about confident in the path, 70% are either somewhat uncertain or absolutely uncertain. And then 30% are somewhat certain. So I think that's not uncommon, and that's why Deb and her team are great at what they do. So that's a place to go. We're gonna probably go past 1 p.m. On the hour Eastern time. So as we answer questions, but we'll go take these in order as they came. I'll answer this one, which is the reviews for they're working, but we have an NEI phase 1 SBIR grant with review dates of April 29th and 30th that are happening today. Would you recommend reaching out or just a wait and see approach? And we've also got your fingers crossed for you. What I would say is if you have not had a 15 or 20, 30-minute meaningful interaction with your program officer, I would do that after you get your summary statement. So typically summary statements will arrive 2 weeks. That's usual. So bear in mind that's the usual process. So it might take longer after the study section meets. And when you have that summary statement, when you digest that, that's the time to re-engage with the program officer. Yeah, and then Deb, question 5, can you see those?
I can, yeah.
Okay. So the question is, in regard to the FDA, they have a breakthrough designation for a novel, safe, and very effective treatment for fentanyl addiction that was funded by the NIH for $2.5 million. One site completed, and McLean will complete in November. What does this look like with the new How does this look with the new FDA?
Yeah, it's not a question, and it sounds like it's really promising treatment, so that's terrific. And I think the devil's always in the details of these things. I would say it sounds like they're 2 studies wrapping up, so that is often sufficient, should be. With respect to breakthrough therapy designation, obviously that brings more guidance and support, rolling review, priority review, potential for accelerated approvals, using surrogate or intermediate endpoints, and potentially, expedited clinical development with shorter or smaller trials with streamlined endpoints and trial designs. But again, not guaranteed. It depends on the situation. So I don't think I have reason to say right now that this administration is looking very differently at fentanyl addiction products or products funded by NIDA any differently than other products. But I think that said, if you're already on track with a robust development program, I certainly think you would continue to be on track, especially with breakthrough.
Yeah, great. So I'll pick up the next question, and why don't we do this right at the hour? May, if you would please put up the last question, which is if you'd like to be contacted by Grant Engine or HIC, put in your name and an email address there. So the next question that I had is when are council meetings resuming? Those are ad hoc. They're actually posted on the Federal Register, so you can look online and see when they're meeting, or talk to your program officer. There's a grant that should be a fundable score since November of 2024, but no news, no timeline. We have seen grants recently get awarded in the late calendar 2024 time period. That's still relatively recent, right? So it can absolutely happen. What a fundable score means is a changing landscape. So it's going to change. You'll hear a couple of themes as we answer questions. If it's a truly fundable score, it can happen, but I would engage with your program officer to have that conversation. And really what you're trying to do is help navigate that path. That's a theme you'll hear consistently as we answer questions. And then, Deb, there was a question curious to hear about FDA rumors going around about a new, less burdensome guidance between traditional allografts and full biologic license.
Yeah, I'm thinking what that refers to is the meeting in January. There was a public workshop on cell therapies and tissue-based products, and on generating scientific evidence to facilitate development. So I think that's what it is. And the American Association of Tissue Banks advocated for a revised framework for HCTPs. And that could provide a middle ground framework. And there isn't any guidance on this yet, but I would say that in general, the agency is moving towards thinking about less burdensome regulatory pathways. And so I think that there may be possibility of that, and hopefully to continue. I think this happened just before the change in administration, if I'm not mistaken. But I think that initiative's underway. I think it's likely to continue, and I think the absence of policy people could slow things down, but again, I'm sure some of those people, not all of them are gone, and some of them will be back, and I think that will help. And I hope that the commissioner will be able to harness some of the great thinking that's already underway in the agency for innovation and expediting product approvals.
Yeah, great. Then another question, the next question I had was when and how, this one's for you, Deb, when and how
Yep.
should AI replace animal tox?
Well, okay, so on that one, what I would say is FDA has in fact posted a roadmap on their proposal relating to replacing animal tox. And so I would suggest people look for that. If you can't find it, just ask me. The plan is to start with monoclonal antibodies. And then over the first few years, the first 3 years, they're talking about recommending people explore pre-existing international data. They're encouraging sponsors to submit NAM data. They're talking about developing an open access repository. You can take a look at it. I would recommend, I don't want to read all the details here. It was publicly posted by the agency on the its website, but it does say in the long term, 3 to 5 years, which often is not the long term in the regulatory world, so that's good. FDA will aim to make animal studies the exception rather than the norm for preclinical safety and tox testing. By this stage, validated NAM could cover all critical areas, and FDA requirements can shift to a NAM-based default. So that's the agency's hope at this point, which is pretty quick.
Great. Okay. We had, I'll take the next one. We answered some DEI questions. If we didn't answer them, I'm down to, we have, I think, 52 questions and we're at 15. So we're going to try and go quicker here. But there may be other DEI questions, but if you were early in the questions, we've answered those. Next question is, do you believe that the reclassifications within Health and Human Services give some insight into funding priorities? Like, the new classifications have a higher priority of funding? And I think it depends. I think new programs get a lot of attention, but there's a reason why the National Cancer Institute is one of the 8 agencies that'll be there. Like, cancer is a big problem. It'll still get a lot of funding in the future. So I think the field always progresses. That's why we're focused on clients that have a differentiated product against what's in the standard of care or the state of the art in the market today. So I think the answer really here is it depends. And I think new classifications typically look at, or new areas of focus for funding look at new advancements. And those are typically improvements on the state of the art or standard of care. And that deserves funding because it's going to have a better impact on patient outcomes. So I think it just fundamentally depends, but the funding is typically about novel, innovative programs. And so What's new is a new domain. So I think generally it can, but it just really depends. Will submitted proposals that required a DEI or community benefits plan, they were required, be treated negatively by agencies. So of all the things I'll say, this is one of the most this is one of the most onerous things. I think the answer is yes. Yesterday, there was you had to do this around DEI, and today you have to do that. And we're dealing with this with one of our clients right now. And I think you do need to be mindful about the new notice that was issued on the 21st of April. It's a new world, and those new rules apply to previous solicitations. And again, I think engaging with your program officer, one of the themes you'll hear, and that's a useful tool. We at Grant Engine, and for our clients, we've got a learned and proven way to do that is very effective. So for our clients, we think we have a special and effective way to do that just we've learned over the years of dealing with certain individuals, and how to do that. So that's just one of the benefits of working with us in that regard. Should certain keywords be avoided altogether to increase the chance of receiving grants? Yes. You cannot write a grant with some of those words. If you Google NSF bad words, or you can find that list. For our clients, we're looking at that very specifically. But in other ways, you can't submit a grant without some of those words. Women is one of those words, which is mind-boggling to me to even verbalize. But yeah, you got to be mindful of those DEI words. And I think they're really gravitating towards the more hot button oriented words for DEI. Is industry funding more reliable at this point? I'd say it's challenging. I think equity markets are difficult, as they have always been. And I think non-dilutive funding is as fast or faster than equity funding. So I think I would not say it's more reliable. I think playing the game well, if you want to have a trusted partner to help you guide that, that's an effective way to go. With lower funding, how do you see funding of existing grants versus new grants? So absent anything getting cut for exigent reason, like a DEI rationale, that probably is happening now if it hasn't already happened. I think existing grants clearly will be continued to be funded. And if the budget does come down, a small or a lot, there is a period of readjustment. So it is going to be more competitive for new grants until that normalizes and the budget is able to fund the grants that were approved before. And at that lower budget, that makes it even more competitive for new grants. So I think it thematically is the same in that it's going to get more competitive. Will there be follow-on funding opportunities if you meet KPIs at year 2 of ARPA-H funding? It depends. I think ARPA-H, if you hit your KPIs and you were great to work with, that is useful. We actually have a very important relationship with one of the outsourced vendors for the patio group at ARPA-H, which helps you be successful in your program. They have entrepreneurs in residence, and that group, we can help you connect to that group. So reach out to us if you would like us to connect you to them. If you're not already there, if you don't know them, you should get to know them quickly, but it's competitive to be sure. What makes you conclude that the NIH funding will catch up this fiscal year? Again, it's not a certainty, but if you look at what the underpinning is there, the budgets are approved, and the budgets have been catching up on it for what previous years. So I think if money's there to be spent, it's going to be spent. If it's authorized by Congress, I think it's going to be spent to a great degree. So that's what gives us confidence. It's passed into law for that budget. Would there be any chance for a second phase or reapplication for canceled grants after review. Yes, if you got your grant canceled, can you reapply? I think is the question. Yes, but there's a reason why it got canceled, and that reason needs to not be there for the future. There's a question of what is DEI linkage. That's just a comment to be mindful that that notice, which we'd encourage you to click on and reach, is the new situation, the new case studies. So I think we consolidated questions. I was looking at messages, not questions. So I think we're all caught up. And then last thing I want to mention is definitely follow us on LinkedIn. We regularly post updates of what's going on, new news, notices, things like that. And we also post our content from our blog. So you can follow us on LinkedIn. I'm sure HIC is another place that you can also follow on LinkedIn. We have a major announcement coming up on May 13th. So look for that on LinkedIn. That's a preview of something really, I think, transformational and interesting that will be on LinkedIn. So you can follow us to see that announcement on LinkedIn on the 13th of May, that Tuesday. That's what we had. I think Eric has answered, and others have answered the other questions. So let me pass it back to you, Deb. There's one question that just came in, which I'll answer. But Deb, I'll pass it back to you if you had any comments, thoughts, or.
I just thank everybody for participating. Hope it was helpful. And as I said, a lot has changed, and that's going to cause some disruption, hopefully some opportunities, and be to help if anybody needs help, and just be a resource, because I do think it's going to be changing every day, and keeping a finger on that pulse is going to be really important.
Yeah, true story. We have one last question from Chad. If a grant is pending council review, when would those start up again? You can see when study section meets on your review, on your submission panel tomorrow, that it'll give you a date when study section is planned for, and the council dates are published in the Federal Register, so you can see them online there for individual council reviews. They're happening. It's just happening slower. So Mary, I'll get back to you directly if you want to stick around. But let me just say thank you to everyone for staying longer. Deb, thank you for your insights on being inside the room as a trusted partner to the FDA. And thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate the time and energy. And we're here when you want to reach out. So thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Grant Engine. Thank you all.
Thank you. Mary had asked, so we're going to conclude. I'll just wrap up final questions. Mary had asked about the reorganization slide about NIMH, minority health disease. It was on there in the finest of fine print, as in small. But there are four. I'll just share my screen again quickly. There are four agencies that are slated for elimination, and one of them is NIMHD. You see there at the bottom. That has not happened yet, but and those, I will say, I would hope, let me say it that way, that some of those funding priorities that NIMHD had will get rolled into the new institutes and the new NIH as it occurs. But I think some of them will not. But I think so that's where that is laying out. I think that hasn't, it's called for. I don't know that it's, that ink has dried yet, but that's the landscape. So thanks for that question, Mary. Okay, we're gonna put a bow on the meeting. For the Grant Engine team, I'll send out a quick debrief message for us to huddle back up on. So for the 41 people that are still on the call, thank you again for joining. Have a great day. Thanks, Mary. We'll be in touch. Appreciate it. Take care, everyone.